All right, so let's start with some of the goals that I want to achieve with this session here, and then we'll take a look at a quick outline of where we're going to be going here as well. So one of the goals is that you come away with an understanding of the different types of postdoc opportunities, because that word can cover a range of different expectations and roles there. I want us to be thinking about the purpose and the goals for a postdoc, and that you have a sense of what that might mean in your particular case there. And also, you come away with an understanding of the role that you have to play in the process of identifying a postdoctoral position, if that is something you choose to pursue, and then being successful in that role, if that is indeed what you end up doing here. And we're going to look at a couple of different things along the way here, breaking it down to some different sections of tonight's session. So we'll cover some basic, some concepts and some distinctions that I think will be important there. Think a little bit about purpose and goals, as I mentioned. Talk a little bit about where you might find them, what the application process looks like, and then briefly, we're just thinking about some things to keep in mind for having a successful experience as a postdoctoral scholar here. All right, so start off with some basic concepts. And I like to sometimes start these sessions with a little bit of silliness. And the point I want to make here is that there are a lot of different, in addition to different terms that can be applied to this particular role here, I think this points to a bigger point that there are a number of different things that a postdoc can be. And you may have heard this used just in one particular context or just as a general way there, but I want to unpack that a little bit so that there's some clarity around what it is that we're talking about here. And both for the purposes of understanding some of the larger goals that I want us to keep in mind here, and just to make sure we have a common point of understanding, I want to start with the definition that is employed by some major funding agencies here, like the National Science Foundation and the National Institutes of Health. And I've highlighted some portions of it here because that's going to be important to some of the points that I'm going to be covering in our session here. So both NSF and NIH define a postdoctoral scholar as an individual who's received a doctoral degree and is engaged in a temporary and defined period of mentored advanced training to enhance the professional skills and research independence needed to pursue their chosen career path. And so a couple of features that stand out in this here, and I will emphasize that this definition, as you would expect from who these organizations are, is shaded a little bit more towards what postdocs look like in the sciences, although I think that this also applies to social sciences and humanities in ways as well here. But NSF and NIH emphasize that a postdoc is something that should be temporary. There should be a defined period to it as well. It's not meant to just be an open-ended stage that sort of extends indefinitely until something else happens. Either you're run out of funding or you decide to do something else there. It's meant to provide mentored advanced training. So there should be that professional career development component to it as well here. And the goal of it is to lead to ultimately your independence in whatever career path you end up choosing to pursue here. While a lot of what I'm going to talk about will be relevant for people who are interested in looking to pursue research-related careers, postdocs can be for different types of opportunities, and people who do even research-focused postdocs may choose to use their training in a variety of different roles after doing that as well here. But I'm going to come back to these points in various ways as we go through here. This idea that this is meant to be a temporary stage for a discrete period of time for the purpose of advanced training that is going to ultimately result in your independence here. And you can find them in a lot of different places. We'll be focusing primarily on examples that will be at educational institutions, research universities, but just as a note, and some of you may already have discovered this here, there are a lot of different places where you can find postdocs. There are postdocs that are industry specific. Sometimes there are postdoctoral programs that companies run or that certain industries provide there. Government agencies do this as well. Nonprofits, cultural organizations, research hospitals, if you're in the health sciences, provide this as well, in addition to universities. So there are a lot of different places that offer postdoc positions. And again, what that role is going to look like is going to vary depending on who is providing it as well. Some of these may be more focused on research, others may be focused around certain kinds of professional training or working on specific projects or have a teaching focus to it too. And so understanding what it is you want to get out of this particular experience and how that's going to enhance your future plans and development is going to be important to this. Another way to think about this is to think about how this relates to your doctoral training. Because if you're doing a postdoc, this is because you already completed your terminal degree here. And so the purpose of a postdoc in that respect here is to really help refine those research and professional skills that you have been developing as a doctoral student, but then specifically to be thinking about what this means in terms of moving you on a path towards independence. So this is particularly true in the sciences where at the doctoral stage, a lot of times the projects you may be working on are largely defined by the parameters of your mentor's research agenda, the grant that they might have, the focus of their particular lab. Humanities and social science students oftentimes have a lot more flexibility in terms of the projects that they select, but even in those cases, oftentimes it may be related to their advisor's interest. But particularly in the sciences, the postdoc is meant to be extending, or rather giving you an opportunity to develop that independent investigator skills there, having more control and direction over the types of projects that you're working on, with the purpose of you then being able to be an independent investigator. So that again is just thinking a little bit about how a postdoctoral opportunity relates to your current doctoral training here. I want to make a distinction that I think sometimes gets glossed over here between postdoctoral fellowships and postdoctoral positions. Because while both of them are opportunities that will provide you with that advanced mentored training that ideally should be a pathway to independence, the way that these function is going to be a little bit different here. And how you seek them out and apply for them is going to be a little bit different too. So when I'm referring to a postdoc position here, I'm referring to a role that is offered directly in most cases by a faculty member or by an independent investigator who has their own funding. So in this situation, the process of becoming a postdoctoral researcher is largely going to be handled by that individual or by their lab directly. So a PI might put out or might not. They might expect you to approach them, a call for a researcher to join their particular group for a postdoctoral researcher there. And they're really responsible for that entire process, that hiring process, because in most cases, they're going to be supported by their own research award. It's going to come out of their own grant funding here. And so in order to secure this type of position, you're going to be working directly with a mentor or their lab group in some capacity here. And in many instances, you may inquire about the availability of a position. Some labs will put out notices. Sometimes this will be formal. Sometimes this might just be like a tweet or other sort of post that gets or circulated on a listserv or something here. And anyone who's interested can reach out and inquire about the position and have a conversation, ideally with the PI, and determine if there's a good fit. And then you may submit some initial materials that can vary a little bit. I'll talk about what that can look like a little bit later on here. And then you may have an interview to discuss the position further in light of what it is that you submitted as part of that. But the key point here is that this is largely going to be done one-on-one with an individual investigator here, or who may be a faculty member, or maybe somebody at another type of institution there. In contrast, a postdoctoral fellowship is usually something that is advertised and selected by an institution. It could be a particular university. A department might have a postdoctoral fellowship, and the department makes the decision, and it goes through the normal faculty process for that particular group there. It might be at the level of the university. Maybe the entire university has a cohort of postdoctoral fellows, or like a Society of Fellows program that a number of universities run, where they bring in a cohort of fellows every year, perhaps working around a common theme, perhaps focused on particular disciplines there. But in all of these cases, these are going to be situations where you will be applying more like you would be applying for a fellowship or an outside grant. You're submitting a formal application, and there's a more formal review process. There's likely to be some sort of review committee or review process. It's more than just you working with an individual faculty member who may have an interest in you and your particular skills here. And so the postdocs that are offered by the National Science Foundation function like this. The postdocs that are available to students through, or rather to postdoctoral scholars through NIH function like this, whether that's the F32 award or the F99K00 award. Both of them have postdoctoral components there. Programs through American Council for Religious Society or the Fulbright program. In these cases, you will still be proposing to work with a particular individual. And oftentimes that means that you have to already be in contact with somebody that you would like to work with and secure their support. They might have to submit a letter of interest, or some sort of indication that they would be happy to welcome you, and provide mentorship should you be selected for this opportunity. But ultimately, that mentor is not going to be the one who makes the decision about the funding, and whether you're selected for that particular opportunity here. So this is a more formal process, and it's more similar to applying for a grant or a fellowship for those of you who may have done that already as a graduate student here. The result is the same, an opportunity for additional advanced mentor training, but but the way that you are going to approach it is going to be a little bit different there. And again, even when there is that formal process, it's often your responsibility to identify a potential mentor and to secure their agreement and support in order to be able to apply to this particular process. And in some cases, that means identifying a particular institution. And so with an NSF postdoc, you can go to a wide range of different places with that, and NSF will pay your salary. But you still need to secure the agreement of somebody who'd be willing to take you on as a mentee and as a fellow there. So when I say postdoc position, I'm talking about the first thing. I'm talking about when I say postdoctoral fellowship, these are the sort of situations, those type of opportunities that I have in mind here. So with that, some basic concepts, some definitions, thinking about here. Before we get into thinking about specifically finding opportunities and what that application process looks like, I think it's important to spend a little bit of time reflecting on the purpose of a postdoctoral position, and the goals behind choosing to pursue one here. And the big thing that I really want to emphasize about this is that this is ultimately something that you're going to have to decide if it's the right next stage for you there, and ultimately one where you're going to have to take a lot of the initiative in identifying the opportunity, and pursuing it here. Because this is something that the expectations, even more so than as a graduate student, are that if you're pursuing advanced training for professional development purposes, if the goal is to become an independent investigator, an independent scholar, tenure track faculty member in your particular field here, that you are going to be invested in that and are going to be the one who's really going to do the legwork necessary to identify this sort of opportunity here. But in order to do that, though, you need to have a clear sense of why you would want to choose to pursue a postdoc, because many career paths are open to individuals with doctorates that don't require a postdoc. In some disciplines, it's an expected path to faculty positions. This is particularly true of the sciences, but it's becoming more and more common in social sciences and humanities fields as well. That used to be rare, but now oftentimes people are spending a year or two or more, sometimes in multiple postdoctoral positions before securing a tenure track position there. In other fields, though, it's basically an expected part of training. It would be very unusual in some, particularly science fields, to go immediately from graduate student to a faculty role, particularly if it was at a research institution here. So if that's something you're interested in, if you want to pursue a faculty position, that may be an expected path to faculty positions, or it may be the case that even if not all faculty roles are filled from people who are recent postdocs there, that postdocs are just much more competitive candidates compared to recent PhD graduates there. So that may be a reason that if that's your goal, you would want to pursue this here. With that in mind, you may be looking to build on your publication record, to expand your publication record, or maybe to gain publications in a different area. And that's also part of it as well, to diversify your research training, to gain additional technical skills, or to extend your research into a different direction, new study system, a different type of project there, to develop your scholarly range, again with the goal of showing that you have the potential to be successful as an independent investigator, that the dissertation was not the only research idea you had, and that you're kind of a one-trick pony, that you're capable of doing more things like that. Another reason that might be the case here is for international scholars who may be seeking one of the self-sponsored paths to permanent residency, and I'll briefly talk about this a little bit later. You may be looking to expand again some accomplishments and achievements that may be necessary to demonstrate your qualifications for some of those types of visas. So if you're in that particular situation, that's certainly not the only path to being able to remain working in the United States here, but that is a possibility for some individuals here. And so if that's something you're thinking about, a postdoc could be important for developing that record of accomplishment that may be necessary for that next stage here. but again, I just want to emphasize that you should have a clear reason for doing this here, because in many cases, the careers that you are qualified to pursue and may want to pursue with the doctoral training that you have here will not require having done a postdoc. The number of roles that strictly require it is pretty small here. That's not to say that there may not be benefit to doing it for various reasons, but I would caution against anyone just doing it as because, well, I don't know what else I'm going to do. And other people in my field have done postdocs here. You need to make sure you have a good reason for it, and again, that this is something that is ultimately going to help prepare you for the opportunity or the types of opportunities that you would like to be able to pursue. Regardless of the specific reason that you might be interested in a postdoctoral opportunity or the types of careers you may be interested in, there are some big picture goals that I think spread across whatever type of postdoctoral position or fellowships you might be considering here. I've already mentioned several times this importance of gaining independence, again, through having a greater role in formulating your own projects and ideas here, in some cases through being able to secure your own funding to enhance your training here, through being able to seek out new research partnerships and collaborations. But regardless of what it is, you are taking more ownership, and you are moving into a stage where you're not just under the mentorship of your PhD advisor. You're seeking out people who you believe will provide you with training and support to take that next step here. It's also about building a professional identity. Again, whether you're thinking about this as a stepping stone to a research or faculty career, or maybe you're open to a number of different possibilities, this is a chance to enhance your professional identity. By doing a dissertation, you've established yourself as an expert in a particular area. You've done an original, substantial piece of research that's a contribution to your field. And so this is a chance to really stake out more about your professional identity here, your research agenda, and through the network of scholars that you have a chance to potentially collaborate with. This is about building your reputation and your visibility within your particular field here. It's also a time to further clarify your career goals. That's not to say that things can't change, or that maybe you start off doing a postdoc because you're really committed to a faculty career, and then at some point during that experience, you realize you want to take things in a different direction. That's always fine. This is your life. But you should be using that time to be reflecting on what that next step is going to be here. Again, thinking about a postdoc is something that should be temporary, and it should be a bridge to something. It's not a destination in and of itself. It's a step along a journey in your development here. And that ultimate goal should be to secure a job, a position afterwards that aligns with your skills, interests, and values. Those interests and values can shift, they can develop. You might pivot for other reasons. Life events can happen, priorities shift. That's totally fine. But ultimately, that should be the next step after completing this particular stage of your training here. Some of the things that any postdoctoral experience should do is give you a range of skills in addition to the specific mentored research training that you may be taking here. And so there's some useful points that the National Postdoctoral Association has identified here that I want to emphasize here as well. I'll also stress that if you are not aware of this, the University of South Carolina is a member of the National Postdoc Association. You can access their resources. You can set up an account through that. You can search for that information on the university website, and it will take you to there, and you can do that. NPA is constantly doing webinars, professional events. They have emails you can sign up for that will let you know about trainings and things that are going on there. They have leadership opportunities among current postdocs. Sometimes positions are advertised there. They have job boards and things like that as well. So definitely a resource to take advantage of if you're not already doing so. But they also have a number of useful statements and resources really around helping you plan for success and being intentional about your postdoctoral training. And they identify 6 key competencies that are really with the purpose of developing essential research and essential soft skills that all postdoctoral positions should be able to provide you with. So there's that discipline-specific conceptual knowledge, research skill development. So there are the things that are specific to your particular field there, but then other things that are more broadly applicable across disciplines, across research projects there, like communication and professionalism, leadership and management skills, and then responsible conduct of research. So what that's going to look like will vary in any particular position here. But again, any useful postdoctoral experience should be one in which you will have opportunities to develop in all of those areas there, not just in the research projects and research execution skills. And so that means with that in mind, you should think about what are those skills that you want to develop? What are the areas in which you'd like to gain some additional training or competencies or experience to help you prepare for that next step, for where you're building that bridge to that destination there. Um, in addition to things like specific research skills, a goal could be that you want to secure independent funding. There are more grant opportunities available at the postdoc level than there are as a graduate student. And so if you haven't had an opportunity to apply for a fellowship, or maybe you haven't and you haven't been awarded one, getting that funding track record that can be really important in many disciplines can be an important goal for a postdoc there, because that may be really an essential piece for being able to be seen as a viable candidate for a tenure track position. Same thing with publications. You may be looking again to expand both the quantity of publications, but also, the quality of them as well, targeting specific journals, or, expanding your research into new areas to show that you have published research in more than just the areas related to your graduate school training there. There are other types of experiences you can get at a postdocs as well. Again, some of them might have a teaching focus to it. You may be required to teach a particular course, or maybe really a teaching-centered postdoc in addition to research there. So if that's something, if you're looking maybe to work in a teaching-focused institution, and you haven't had much chance as a graduate student to be able to do that, that could be something that you would want to do as well. Again, you may be thinking about moving your skills into a different direction, maybe like in policy or public-facing scholarship. There may be opportunities that are more focused on that as well. There are some opportunities that are really about uh, different diversifying career outcomes for PhD students. The ACLS Leading Edge Fellowship for Humanities and Social Sciences is all about pairing PhDs with a variety of nonprofit social justice organizations to work specifically on their mission and their goals there. And the point is to prepare students with advanced training in the humanities and social sciences for diverse careers in different sectors with different types of organizations there. So a postdoc there is not going to be about research at all. It's going to be about bringing that expertise and developing new skills to help certain organizations achieve their goals and further their particular missions there. And so if that's something you want to do, if you're interested in moving into that direction, a postdoc with an organization, with like a nonprofit organization, might be something that would be really of interest to there as well. Or a postdoc that's offered by a specific government agency, for example, that might help you move into the policy space or pursue a federal career. So it's up to you in terms of what are the options you might be considering and the types of career paths you may be open to. But you should think carefully about that, because the type of skills you're going to learn from a research-focused postdoc are going to be very different than the ones that's offered potentially through certain government agencies or through certain nonprofits or other organizations there. I mentioned that I wanted to briefly touch on the situation of international scholars here. I will preface this with my usual disclaimer that I am not an immigration attorney, and I do not want to mislead anybody about the immigration process here. So please do not construe this as me telling you what you need to do to obtain a certain kind of visa. I just want to note that there are certain paths to self-sponsorship in addition to having an employer-sponsored visa as a way to become a permanent resident in the United States. These are EB-1 and EB-2 visas. The EB-1 is the extraordinary ability visa. The other one is the national interest waiver for people who have exceptional track records or whose skills are in areas that have been deemed of national interest by the U.S. government here. So depending on your situation, this may be something that you're considering. Again, not the only pathway for that, but one of the ways to secure that particular type of visa is to demonstrate that you are a leading expert in a certain area, that you possess skills, that you have a notable reputation in your field there, and are significant experts that would then let you qualify for one of these self-sponsored paths there. And so that means having documentation that can show your impact in your field, things like citation indexes, in some cases, publication record, confirmation of work in progress there, demonstration of your scholarly involvement, such as your invitation to speaking engagements, conference activities, if any of your work has been covered in the media, if you've had leadership roles, your network of other scholars who can speak to your qualifications here. So again, if that's a possibility for those of you who may be international scholars here, that you're thinking about, a postdoc can be an opportunity to gain additional experience in some of those areas, to expand that publication record, to take on new leadership opportunities, to network with more scholars and get additional people who can vouch for the value of your skills and your exceptional training and potential and things there. So again, I don't want to say too much about this because this is not my area of expertise, but I just want to note that this is another reason that some people you may be thinking about postdocs, and I would encourage you again to approach it with whatever you need in terms of your particular purposes based on your situation. So we've talked a little bit about some basic concepts with postdocs. We talked about thinking about the goals and the purposes behind it here as well. The next thing I wanted to focus on is how do you go about finding these opportunities? Again, there are lots of different ones. They're offered by a lot of different organizations and individuals there. And so that process is going to look a little different depending on the type of opportunity you're seeking out, whether it's a postdoctoral position or postdoctoral fellowship. But I want to speak broadly about how you might identify these opportunities in either case. I mentioned this a little bit earlier when I was talking about postdoc positions and how, because they're connected with individuals, the way that that information is shared can vary here. But I'll emphasize this again, is that in many cases, postdoctoral opportunities are not advertised, or at the very least, they're not necessarily advertised in the same way that a faculty job would. Some of them certainly are, but I say this because you don't necessarily want to just limit yourself to things that you may see formally advertised again on a job board or that goes out through some sort of professional communication here. Because there are some faculty, some investigators that expect prospective postdocs to reach out directly. If you have research skills or goals that really coincide with the work of a particular faculty member, they may be open to having a conversation about whether they might have the ability to bring you on as a postdoc in their lab. Again, how that works can really vary. It depends on how their institution might handle it. It depends on what their own funding situation might be. So that is something that can really vary in terms of that. But just be aware, if you aren't already, that it's not uncommon for opportunities to not necessarily be advertised in the same formal way. And if there's somebody who would really you think would be a great fit for your training and your mentorship, it's perfectly fine to reach out to see if they might have a position that's available. And so because of that, this is why it's really important to be using that network and using those advanced research skills that you have to identify potential postdoc mentors that you might want to approach to see if there might be a good fit for what it is that you'd like to be able to do there. And so, take advantage of those opportunities when you're at conferences or when a visiting scholar comes to give a talk on campus, or any other sort of professional event there to start up that conversation and start to get a feel for somebody and their research to see if it's somebody which you might be interested in inquiring about whether or not they might be available to serve as a mentor or to have a position in their research group here. On some fields, people are pretty active on social media in terms of sharing their research. Again, this really varies, but in some disciplines, that's where a lot of research is shared, and so that's an opportunity to be following along to see who's doing work that's exciting that you would again potentially want to participate in, or who you think might be a great potential mentor for a training opportunity here. So following people who are active and sharing their recent publications or their ideas or their opportunities can be another way to find them. It can also be helpful just to see, who has grant funding in the areas that you're interested in. Because again, in many cases, if it's a postdoctoral position, they may be supporting any postdocs in their lab with funding from their particular grant there. And so you can see through, at least with major federal funders, currently funded awards. And so you can look up from NIH or NSF or the National Endowment for the Humanities and see what sort of awards that are currently out there in areas that might be of interest to you. Because there might be an investigator that you'd really like to work with, but maybe they don't have the current funding for it, or they're in the process of securing that next grant or something there. So this will give you some idea both of who's doing the research that you're interested in and who might potentially have the means to be able to support you in a postdoc position as well. So these are some of the ways that you can be thinking about how to identify potential funding opportunities here. And if you do decide to try to reach out to somebody there, it's perfectly fine to send somebody a cold email. in the same way that you may have done this when you were applying to graduate school, when you were looking at potential mentors there. It's really a similar process there, where you can send a short email that introduces yourself, saying what your qualifications are, about why you're interested in their particular group, about some particular skills and abilities that you will be able to bring to that group, and how you might be interested in contributing there, as well as sharing an up-to-date CV and extending an invitation to have a short conversation to follow up with that. And so this is kind of a very basic template here, but for anybody who may be interested, particularly in using LinkedIn, I recommend Jillian Goldfarb. She's a professor of chemical engineering at Cornell who's very active in sharing advice about graduate student professional development and postdoc opportunities. And this is one of her resources. But again, she has a lot of great posts related to that, and really has kind of taken that on as a mission to try to expose the hidden curriculum around these sort of things in both graduate and postdoctoral training. And while the focus is on engineering disciplines, a lot of it really is applicable across STEM, and I would say even more broadly than that. And so it's definitely fine to just reach out to somebody and see if they might be interested. If they don't respond, if they say no, oh well, but you really can do this here as well. I know grad students who have done this and have found successful postdoctoral opportunities just by reaching out to somebody, starting that conversation and realizing, okay, this seems like a promising opportunity here. So not only is this a possibility, in many cases, this is how people find their positions. But that's not the only way. There are positions that are advertised. Some labs will do it that way. They'll send out, they want to have a wide pool of applicants, or at least they want their research need to be widely available here. And so there are job boards and other resources that can be available for finding this here. These are a series of links. I will share these slides with all of you in a follow-up tomorrow. And so if you're not already aware of some of these here, I would encourage you to take a look at them. Some of these are stronger in certain areas than others in terms of the number of positions, in terms of their particular focus. Some of them are specific to certain areas or just specific universities that collaborate together to share certain types of opportunities. But I would just spend a little bit of time looking for these in addition to pursuing other options there. Again, if you're interested in postdoctoral positions as well as for fellowships, you can find both of them here. And it's really about finding the right fit. And so it might be something that's advertised, it might be something that's available through one of the fellowship programs that I mentioned before here, or it might be something that you find directly connected with a particular mentor here. So take advantage of these particular sources. And I mentioned before that the National Postdoc Association is something that all of you as students can join for free and take advantage of that, in addition to the other professional development and training resources that I mentioned before. Beyond even that, there are some other tools that can be used for finding funding or just for broader ranges of jobs in general that also contain postdoctoral positions. Zintellect and Pivot are two databases. Some of you have probably heard me talk about these before because I recommend them to graduate students quite a bit for finding fellowship opportunities here. But be aware that these can also be used for finding postdoc experiences as well. For Zintellect, that's an option when you search under academic levels. That database is particularly focused on opportunities from national laboratories and government agencies. It's mostly focused on STEM and some social science disciplines there. Pivot is broader. You can select postdoctoral or fellowships or postdoctoral awards under funding type. And then when you do that, you would also want to look for early career and emerging in field under career stages. And that will show you options that are open to postdoctoral scholars here. And particularly ones that might be like fellowship programs that I mentioned before, you might be able to find those in Pivot. And then a resource like Higher Ed Jobs, which you may already be looking at as well if you're also applying to faculty jobs right now, if you're open to that possibility too. Sometimes postdoc positions are posted there as well. They're typically listed under faculty jobs too. So again, if you're searching widely, I would encourage you to take advantage of all these resources because there are a wide range of different opportunities, and all of these kind of specialize or focus in on certain types of options there. And again, many of the funders that offer graduate student fellowships also offer postdoc awards. So I mentioned NSF and NIH, but there are also a lot of other funders out there that offer awards to graduate students, and in some cases they have postdoc awards too. various things too. So in education, the Spencer Foundation is a postdoctoral award in addition to their dissertation completion fellowship, for example. And that's the case for a number of other professional organizations or entities that provide graduate training too. So all of those are some ways to apply. Again, some of this is going to require, all this is going to require effort on your part to investigate there. Some of it is going to require maybe a little bit more research in terms of postdoctoral positions where they may not necessarily be broadly advertised. But next, I want to talk a little bit of what that application process can look like. And it is going to vary depending on a fellowship or a position, as I mentioned before. So depending on the type here, the type of materials you might have could look like the following things. So for a postdoc position, something again where you may be working with an individual faculty member who has resources available and is open to supporting somebody in their particular research group or lab, you might submit a cover letter, a CV with some references. In some cases, you may be required to submit additional documents. Again, that depends on what the nature of that position is. If there's a teaching component, some sort of teaching portfolio or teaching statement, the sort of thing you may already be working on for faculty jobs might be expected there as well. You may be expected, particularly if it is a humanities or a social science postdoc, to provide some sort of work sample, a dissertation chapter, a publication that gives some sense of your approach as a scholar here. And for again, particularly humanities and social science postdocs, a research statement where you outline the specific work that you intend to do as a postdoctoral fellow. So some of this is going to depend on fields there. But in general, you'll definitely have some sort of cover letter where you'll focus on what it is that you bring to that particular research group, how you see yourself, the type of projects you might want to work on, how you see yourself contributing, as well as a CV. For a postdoctoral fellowship, again, that's more like a grant application in some ways, where you're submitting a variety of documents that will then be reviewed through some formalized review process. And that will almost certainly involve a research proposal as well as a cover letter, because again, the decision is not just going to be made by the potential research mentor you have identified for a fellowship. And so reviewers want to know what it is that you're planning to do, and they want to see if they think that your fellowship, your research proposal is something that's going to be significant and fits with the particular goals of that agency there. You may also be expected to submit a budget for something like that as well. Again, because it's not just specific to one particular individual and it's going through some sort of program that may offer different levels of support there. So you may need to explain certain research related expenses you may need. In some cases, there may just be a standard amount that everybody gets, a certain salary amount or a research allowance up to a certain number there. For postdoc fellowships, letters of support are oftentimes expected as well. This is different from a letter of recommendation, which is something that may also be expected here. A letter of support is again, for a situation where you are ultimately going to be working with somebody, but that person is not the one who's making the decision about whether you're going to be funded for this opportunity. So the letter of support is somebody who is going to be willing to mentor you, saying, yes, I would be happy if this person is selected, for this NIH postdoc, for this NSF award, to welcome them to our research group, and I will provide them with mentorship, et cetera, what they need to be successful there. So it's not the same as a letter of recommendation in the sense that they're not necessarily writing in support of your research project. They're not trying to argue for your qualifications there. It's more to show that you have secured somebody who is willing to provide the mentorship and provide a position for you if you are selected to receive that particular type of funding. So when it comes to those cover letters, which again is basically a standard feature in most postdoc positions where there's any sort of formal application process, even if it is just with an individual, the length can vary here. I would say it's typically 1.5 to 2 pages. In STEM disciplines and humanities, it's usually at least basically 2 letters or 2 pages, rather single space. They tend to be a little longer, a little more detailed. But what you're doing in both cases is covering a couple of key points there. So there's going to be a few paragraphs where you talk about your previous research that's relevant to the position here. And this is really going to be about demonstrating your qualifications and the skills you're bringing. So it's going to be really important when you do this to highlight your particular contributions here. So this is, again, and I talk about this when I talk about graduate fellowships as well, a little bit of a break for some disciplines here where typically you're writing more in terms of we or writing in the passive voice because you're focusing on the procedure or on the results here. In this case, the point is to show that you have particular skills and you've contributed to research. So you want to focus on what you did. How did you contribute to a particular project? What were the outcomes of that project? What were the skills you gained from that research? And how does that somehow connect to your motivation for applying for this current application? How did that get you interested in this particular topic? How did it give you skills that you now are looking to build upon or take in new directions with this particular opportunity here? And then again, depending on the length, depending on the requirements, the norms for your particular field here, you want to have at least a paragraph, potentially several paragraphs when you're talking about the new research that you want to do with this lab or the new skills approaches you're going to be bringing to the lab that you're looking to learn from this particular opportunity. So again, depending on what it is, you may be expected to propose an original project. In other cases, it may be more about, again, demonstrating that you're going to be bringing something of value to the lab and that the lab has something to offer you, which is why you'd be interested in doing it anyway, in terms of being able to learn, again, certain skills, certain techniques, taking your research in new directions, working on new study systems, expanding your range, and those sort of things as well. So those are the sort of things you want to focus on in a cover letter for a postdoc here. Another common feature of at least postdoc positions, this may not be the case for the postdoc fellowship, although I would encourage you to reach out to a potential mentor and have a conversation with them anyway, is an interview. And an interview, whether this is something that's formal or whether this is you reaching out to start a conversation with somebody, is really about determining your fit for the opportunity. If it is a formal part of the interview process, the goal here is to really show your motivation, your interest in learning, your desire to create knowledge. So you want to show that you're going to be a great member of this research group. You've got skills, you're excited to contribute, that you really want, that they are going to appreciate the value that you're going to add to it there. Your focus here is not so much on what you're going to get out of it, it's showing what you're going to be able to contribute and that you are going to be a team player, that you're interested in learning, that you're motivated, and that you are really passionate about advancing knowledge in your field here. So that's the one part of it, trying to sell yourself and get them interested in seeing you as a valuable contributor to their research there. The other part of it, though, is that you're also trying to vet the mentor. You're trying to get a sense of who this person is and whether or not that they are going to be a supportive person who's going to help you gain the skills that you want to gain, help you get the kind of experience you want out of the postdoc, and ultimately advance you in success for that career path that you're considering here. And this is really an important part here. And I want to emphasize this, especially for any international scholars, because again, if this is a postdoctoral position, that person has a lot of power over your career. And again, because you may be connected with your visa status there, that can put you in a potentially vulnerable situation. And so there's only so much you can know beforehand as you consider opportunities there. But you really want to do as much as you can to get a sense of whether this person is going to be invested in your success. And while I certainly hope everybody has positive experiences with their current graduate mentors and with anybody that they work with in the future, unfortunately, there are situations with people who take advantage or mistreat those in their research group and are not interested in their success and really just see them as labor to be exploited. Again, hopefully that is not anybody's case here, but you don't want to end up in that sort of situation, particularly if that person ends up having a lot of control over your future career direction because your visa status is connected with that. And so please do due diligence, try to get a good understanding of the people you're working with and whether you feel like this is going to be a productive relationship and whether they're invested in your success and their goals for you are ones that also align with what it is that you want here as well. Because it's also making sure that this is going to be a mutually beneficial situation too. Do your research goals and training goals align with what that mentor is even able to provide? They might be a great person, they might be really interested in you, they might be somebody who'd be invested in your success, but if they can't really give you the training that you're looking for, if their research isn't really the best fit for where you want to take your career, then they may not be a good option either. So those are the sort of things that you're trying to figure out, even at the same time that you're trying, if this is part of the actual application process, to demonstrate that you are eager and qualified and are going to be a great addition to the work that's being done. So in those conversations, in those interviews there, again, well, in addition to trying to describe your qualifications and your interests there, there's some questions that you might consider asking if you're not able to otherwise get the answer to this here that are important to helping you do that process of vetting the mentor and getting a sense of whether or not this is going to be a good fit for you. So, understanding the funding situation. Is there an expectation that you're going to have to seek out additional funding for research expenses there? Um, is the project grant going to be ending soon? And does that place sort of a firm time limit on when things end, or does that mean that that you may not be able to guarantee a certain amount of training at this stage here? Clarifying expectations. What do they want you to get out of this particular experience here? Learning a little bit more about where previous trainees have gone. What type of careers have they pursued? Are they the sort of things that you're interested in? Maybe you're not interested in just a strict research career, or at least you're open to other possibilities there. So, finding out if somebody else is somebody who's gone into industry or gone into working in the public sector, for example, that could be useful as well. Trying to get a sense for someone's management style. Are they very hands-on? How do they evaluate? What does success look like in their eyes, and how are they going to determine that? And then some other questions too, maybe a little bit uncomfortable sometimes, but wanting to understand, how are projects allocated? How are decisions made about who works on what? How are manuscripts written? How is basically intellectual property going to be shared here? If you work on something in this lab, can you take part of that project or some of that IP with you? Those are the things that, again, can be potentially a little uncomfortable, but certainly before you sign off on anything, it's really worth clarifying that, because you don't want to come to a situation where there have been some unvoiced expectations on both sides, and you realize, oh, we really should have clarified this earlier on because I assumed I could do X and Y, and my mentor had different understanding of what that was going to look like. And then ultimately, how are they going to foster your independence? What are they going to do to try to help you achieve that next stage in your training as a scholar, and a researcher, or whatever the case might be, as an expert in a particular field, or somebody moving into a particular career path. So this is not something that you have to ask everyone. These are just some examples of some questions to think about as you're trying to generate useful responses that can really help you figure out if something is going to be a good fit or not. All right, so we're getting near to the end here. We've talked about some basic concepts of postdocs. We've talked about setting appropriate goals and understanding the purpose behind it. We've thought about where to find them and a little bit about the application process. I just want to end again with a few broad observations about being successful should you decide to pursue a postdoc and ultimately end up in one of those positions or fellowships here. So I've emphasized this earlier as well, but I'm going to keep emphasizing this again. This is a temporary stage. This is something that is supposed to be leading you somewhere here. This is not just a place to spend a year or two or three or four, waiting for something to happen or trying to figure some things out here. What you want might change during the period of your postdoctoral training, but you should be constantly checking in, constantly thinking about what it is that you want to do here. So think about what that next stage is, and think about how you can chart that path to independence through whatever your options are. Maybe it's working on that manuscript, turning that dissertation into a monograph, because you know that that's going to be important for getting tenure as a faculty member, if you're in a humanities discipline here. Or again, if you're in a STEM field, about gaining greater research independence and developing new projects that can show your range as a scholar here. Even if you don't have a firm timeline established by the award, in some cases you might, accept a position that says this is for 2 years, or this fellowship will support you for a year or for 3 years. You may be in a position where it could be kind of extended somewhat indefinitely, based on your interest of continuing to stay there. If there isn't a hard deadline there, I would give yourself one, though. Give yourself a mental timeline for when you intend to leave, if that's not already been set. Again, life can change. Things can happen. You don't have to stick to that, but I think it's important to have some sense about when you expect to be able to take that next step there. So that if that timeline is not already being imposed, you're taking ownership of that and thinking about that next part there. And with that in mind, think really carefully about the kind of projects that you're planning on doing. I'm thinking particularly about those of you in the sciences here. You want to make sure that you can actually carry out a feasible primary project, because you're looking for publications, you're looking for research skills, you're looking for things that you can then build upon to establish your qualifications and that pathway to independence here. And so making sure that whatever the main project you're working on is something that is going to be feasible within the timeline that we propose there. And then it's also useful to have some other projects kind of going that you may be able to develop. One, in case the first project doesn't work out for whatever reason, that you know you're going to have something you can take away from it. And two, to make sure that you're exploring some other areas. Or to make sure that you are taking full advantage of the type of training and opportunities that might be available with a particular role that you've taken on there. And that's both to demonstrate your own budding independence as an investigator, and again, it's also something that provides a little bit of backup should the main project you're working on stall or some other roadblock come up along the way. Because research is open-ended, things don't always work out. And you can't assume that everything is going to pan out perfectly and is going to result in the publications that you are expecting or whatever other skills or things that maybe you were originally going in. And so being intentional, giving yourself some options, thinking about the feasibility so that you're not feeling like you're stuck waiting to actually finish a project until you can take that next step because the thing that you're working on has such a long timeline to it that it's really kind of holding you back from pursuing the other things that you want to do there. This is where having an individual development plan can be really important. I know some of you have probably already done this. This is required by certain funders. NSF now requires this for any graduate student who is being funded through them, including just through a mentor's grant. NIH requires these for awards here. Some graduate programs I know require their students to do that. So this may already be something that you're familiar with. If you're not, then I would encourage you to do this. And if you are, I would encourage you to keep doing this as a postdoctoral fellow. This is really just being intentional about setting out some goals for different areas of professional development. And it's really something that for the postdoctoral stage, you should do in consultation with your mentor because you want to make sure that you're on the same page. And one of the ways to do that is to have some agreed upon expectations there, you know, about what your goals are, about what progress looks like, so that you're making the progress that you want to make and that your mentor is also satisfied with what it is that you're doing there. So, you know, there might be specific accomplishments that you want to achieve, some goals, some next steps that you want to take, some benchmarks for progress that you want to identify here. And there's a link that I have embedded here to some resources that the graduate school at USC has about IDPs. Again, you can find different templates. There's not any one way to do this. You know, you can just kind of chart it out in different ways, but you can follow that link to get one potential template here. And again, this is really something for your own personal planning, but ideally, this is something that your mentor is at least aware of. And certainly for things around expectations and measuring progress, there should be a conversation about that. And that may be something, depending on the funding that you get, that you may be required to do anyway as part of it. But regardless, I think it's a good tool to make sure that you're being intentional and that you're checking in with yourself in addition to checking in with your mentor for success in this process. And so this is another way to think about this here in terms of if you're doing a multi-year postdoc, again, think about what it is you're trying to accomplish at each particular stage there. I mean, really, it's the same things, but you're doing it at a different level with a different kind of purpose there. So, you know, starting off with initially trying to do a little bit of exploration about next steps, thinking about the skills you want to develop, starting to enhance your network. In the meantime, you know, thinking about specific skills and maybe making you more competitive for the particular job that you want to pursue after that so that you have enough time to master them and be able to demonstrate them in preparation for pursuing that opportunity here. And again, building that particular network there. And then really using that final year for the purpose of finding that next position. That should be the big goal for that last year. You know, developing strong job search materials, working on any interview, negotiating skills, professional communication skills, really tapping into that network to find whatever the next opportunity that you're looking for here as well. Again, this is part of the timeline that the National Postdoc Association has put together. They have some additional resources that unpack that a little bit more, but I think that's a useful way. And again, the goal is to be intentional about how you're preparing for that next step at each stage, even if you know you might be in a position for 2 or 3 or sometimes more years, depending on your field and depending on what it is that you're working on. All right, we've covered a lot of different things here. I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing my screen. I'll just flag some of the resources that I drew upon in putting this together here. Again, I will send all of you these slides, and I encourage you to follow up with any of these and to follow up on some of the links that are included here as well. But I'm happy to answer questions that anybody might have, and I'll go ahead and stop the recording for this portion of things.